You know who made it.
All right, we got another Friday. We're going to be talking about how to correctly deploy capital in your organization. How do you prioritize what you're working on, product features, etc. Top down, bottom up management friction in the age of where we are now with capital tightening and the requirements of actually producing value. A lot of companies that aren't AI companies don't have these massive runway budgets. If you're getting funded, if you're in a different kind of corporate environment, you're starting to see much more, what is the return on investment? Starting to see jockeying for how do I get my thing funded?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think like deploying capital is like kind of the first topic to me was the better way of saying like, how do you prioritize or how do you like product prioritize between new products, features, 0 to 1? Do you invest in new stuff? And I know that there's an endless scoop of resources out there of people's opinions on this. And I think the thing that always falls short is it's the primary question is how do you deploy the capital, right? How do we spend the money?
Mm-hmm.
And it always gets lost in every sort of, there's, a million different prioritization frameworks for product world. There's project management frameworks, there's funding frameworks. And it always like starts out as, oh, this is just going to be an easy way for us to, get a level playing field. And then you start arguing about the categories and they're all subjective. And it just becomes like another bureaucratical oversight, I guess. And then it all goes to, and then you spend your entire quarter prepping for the next quarter of calculations that are all meaningless because you're just making up anyway. I've worked in companies that do this both ways. So I think like, it, for me, it really comes down to, you have to have a vision. And it's not enough to talk about it. Like the vision has to be understood, communicated, and executed by the company, the team, whatever level you're at. And what I see much more of now, especially with all this AI nonsense, is that you have people who, vibe code something and then think that they're a developer and the company should be moving so much faster because I just developed my wine tasting app on ChatGPT or whatever. And they don't understand that there's scale. They don't understand that there's legacy code bases. You have customers who are expecting that you can't just
security
exactly. Someone has to support it when someone hasn't. There's all sorts of other things. And so they're like, well, it's easy. This is the vision. And yeah, sometimes the vision's easy, but when it comes to people understanding the vision, the biggest thing I see is that the executive level tends to be pretty good in vision, and where the companies that struggle really fail is when the executives can't get that vision understood and executed by their employees, or when they try to like micromanage and like implement the vision themselves or force the vision. They don't let people naturally solve problems. And so like the vision has to be executable. This 10,000 year vision nonsense is nonsense. It's like, what are we doing in the next, couple quarters or a year? Yes, we need a long-term, strategy for the plan of the company, but it too far. And then you have to be focusing on guardrailsing stuff, right? And what are the limitations? Maybe that's a budgetary limitation. AI always comes up. How do we start with AI? You start. It's that simple. Right. And so what are your guardrails? Well, these types of documents we're not going to give to the AI. We're going to spend this much money. And that doesn't mean if you spend the money, then it's done and you just don't ever do it again. We're going to spend this much budget on credits or whatever you want to call it, time, energy, whatever. And then we're going to check in to say, what did we learn?
Yeah.
Right. It's not, you might not produce something valuable the first few times, but you need to get started. But a lot of times you need to put some sort of limitation because you can't just blow, you've used this stuff. Like it's easy to spend a lot of money on AI if you're doing it wrong, and you're going to do it wrong when you first start.
I mean, it's easy to spend money in general, right? But I think this does connect a lot to some stuff we talked about with respect to innovation and capital, right? I think especially when we get to the maybe the higher, more executive level, the execution is not so much of doing it yourself, but
Yeah.
deploying the right capital with the right people such that they can do the things to move you towards that vision. And the more layers you have of communication between the executives and then the people doing the work, the more the mission gets diluted.
Yeah.
And capital is kind of the only way you really have to anchor some of that. And like this, maybe this is feeding into the top down versus bottom up approach, but I've been in organizations where it ends up being, I don't know if you call them middle managers, but like directors, VPs are
Yeah.
pitching for higher budgets for whatever reason, for whatever
Yep.
their
You
initiative
get budget
is.
jacketing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, right. And you get this political game of, weirdly enough, internally you're fighting each other
Yep.
and not driving the company forward because you want the budget to do your own thing. It's up to the executives to kind of streamline all of it,
But
bring
they
it all
don't,
together. Right?
right? And
Yeah,
that's one of the big things that kills these kind of things, because then you have to come up with a metric that all the product
right.
teams work on. And
Yeah,
it's like, well, my product doesn't really have the same metrics as your product does.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, fine. But like, if we're all going to try to normalize it, then it's not going to work. And it never does. Never, ever works. You get some stupid process and you get a bunch of politics, and then you don't actually build software that pushes your company forward or makes really innovative products that differentiate you from the competition. You just become one of the many names doing mediocre work.
Right. Yeah.
And like this, you're kind of hitting on something I was thinking about too, is that like the structural alignment of how the teams are structured is also a massive issue when it comes to deploying capital. I've seen it too, where you have to like bid for people's time on other
Yeah.
teams because
Yeah.
it's like some weird resource allocation structure. And it's like, you need to have cross-functional teams that are allocated to your vision
Mhm.
based on what you think the needs are. And that probably shifts over time. So you have to be amenable to say, oh, we've hit this roadblock, or to get to the next level, we think we need these people or these roles or this information or knowledge to come into this cross-functional team. And that cross-functional team needs to be solely anchored in the vision or the execution of the thing they're building. I
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
so much where it's like, we're going to do the everything thing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you're going to get
Yeah. Yeah.
nothing, and you're going
Boil
to,
the ocean. Right.
yeah. And then you get into the end of the quarter, and what did we do? Well, we have to like make up a bunch of nonsense to proclaim how awesome we are because we can't measure anything.
Right. Yeah. 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 I mean, the whole the internal dynamic of your organization, I think, has a huge effect on how the capital one should be spent
Yeah.
and will be spent. Um, I've been in organizations where if you want to do something cross-functional, you have to negotiate with managers because you're borrowing one of my
Yeah.
people. So what how am I supposed to be hitting my metrics for delivery so that I can argue for the budget that I need for next quarter?
Well,
It just becomes this weird game.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's where like I often hear that we have to keep the lights on, right? Keeping the lights on, KLI, all this kind of nonsense.
Mhm.
Yeah, you also got to build new stuff.
Yep. Yeah.
And
Evolve.
so there's all sorts of different ways to do that. But the only types of environments that I see that are very successful is when you either take somebody out of a team that's maintaining stuff and put them on a cross-functional team with the mission of developing the new feature or rolling out the new product or whatever that thing is. And then, making sure that then they can absorb that back into whatever the other stuff you're doing is, because otherwise you just get all these like code-based thrashings and everybody's doing their own little initiative, and going back to like you know competitive versus cooperative team structures is now you're competing, so you just go build this thing and it works really great, and then you walk away and then it all goes to hell because you weren't anticipating 10,000 people, or you weren't anticipating that this other team data shape changed, or you weren't anticipating that some other thing came along down the line, and now it's this massive problem that you built in your company, and the people who built it are long gone doing other stuff, or probably not at the company. And in big tech specifically, I see this all the time where it's like, I build my thing I get the prestige, I get a promotion, I level up, I go to build a team or whatever, and then it just fledgles. And then a lot of times that's what a core business function is,
Right.
but it's not sexy. And, it's like as long as it runs, it's fine until it stops. And then it's a big deal. And then you're burning a bunch of capital trying to fix that problem instead of, running a kind of a 0 to 1 or a just do it, get it done, and then figuring out how do you bring that back into your other structure of the company, or
Yeah.
the structure that I don't think works very well. I've done this as well, is that you kind of spin out the initiative team and they just go
Mhm.
like build a bunch of stuff and
Do
then just kind
stuff.
of toss it.
Then there's no owner. Right. Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you get a lot of stuff and you get a lot of really shitty stuff because their incentive is to just build the thing, make it work, and then move on to the next shiny thing. And that doesn't work. That's kind of the old model of like IT, right? We're going to build this
Uh,
application
yeah. Yeah.
and then IT is going to have to figure out how to run it. And it's, some arcane thing. And then we can't process payroll because, the database version changed or something. So you need to find that hybrid, and you need to, I mean, obviously every company is a little different, but I do think the matrix team and like the temporary matrix team where you're pulling the experts from the different groups that you need to do the thing or you think you need to do the thing is like the only way to really go fast and then also make something that's like scaled and support.
Okay. Can you dig into that, the specifics on how you pull that together? Like I've heard of
Mm-hmm.
um get the name. There was a concept around this, but you basically pull together a team to solve a specific problem, but then you break out that team or disband the team once you think the problem's solved. You do have to find an owner or someone to take it over, and
Yeah,
maybe
I've,
that's what the team
I've heard them like
becomes.
called tiger teams, and those are
Okay.
generally like that's not really what I'm talking about because that's like a reactive, like something broke and we need to really fix it. But with like the matrix approach, it's almost, I guess, I don't know if there's an ideal model, but a model that I do know works really well is the matrix team model, like the old project team, right? It's like we are going to
Mhm.
build an app. So somebody from the front end customer team needs to be involved, or the iOS team or the Android team or whatever. We need some platform people because we're going to build on this service, or we're going to build a new service, or this data is going to be consumed, or we're going to, whatever your thing is, you need to look at what are the edges that we already know exist, try to pull the right groups of people together, knowing that you're probably going to
Experts.
get up. That's fine. But like get the right people together. And the thing that I see a lot of times then is then you don't have the management layer allowing those people to solely focus on the initiative, the vision, whatever you want to call. I'm trying not to use all the buzzwords because then people are like, oh, yeah, we
Uh,
do that. You're not doing it in most cases.
right. Okay.
So
Now does this?
you run that
Sorry. Keep
initiative,
on.
right? And then as you learn and start building, you might need to bring in more people, or maybe other people aren't needed. Oh, I guess we don't really need the marketing team right now because it's too early.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
you run the danger of like everybody wants to be on the team, or nobody wants to make a decision. And so like the product person has to be empowered to be the owner of that process and say, no, we don't need the marketing team yet because we're 6 months away from actually getting this out. I will let the marketing team know what we're doing so they have an awareness, right? You don't want to keep things secret, but you
Yeah.
have to the edge from the scope creep of like everybody needs to be on the team and you have to have
Right.
trust for them. And a lot of organizations
Yeah.
don't have trust. And so people are like, oh, we've tried this and it didn't work. Well, it does work, but you can't just magically
You
throw
haven't
a bunch
tried
of
hard
people
enough.
in a room. Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then you
Yeah.
have your
You weren't doing
manager
it right.
breathing down your neck because all your tickets aren't getting done or your sprint work isn't happening, and then engineers are freaking out, and it's like you have to get people allocated, and you have to have people who have the leadership skills to like execute, and they
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
have the freedom to do that too, right? So I've been at companies where they're like, "Oh, go do this thing," and I go do the thing, and it's like 2 weeks later, like, "Isn't it done?" And I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah.
"You're
Yeah.
incompetent. I don't know what to tell you." Like
Yeah.
getting a large group of people together to do something really hard does not happen in 2 weeks.
Right.
It just
Yeah. Yeah.
doesn't.
Yeah. And I haven't seen this happen or successfully. I haven't seen it work very well. Uh, how does that happen? Where does this team pull the capital
Yeah.
together or
So
the headcount to be able to do something like
yeah.
this?
So it's there's a lot of ways to do this. A way that I think works pretty well is that you kind of project manage the initiative. And so you say,
Okay.
we want to grow our, I'll use an e-commerce example because people have shopped online, right? So like our shopping cart experience sucks. People put stuff in and they don't check out. So we want to see, you know, a simple OKR would be like, 20% conversion. So of the people who go to the site and click the buy
Leave something in the
button or
cart,
add to
actually
the
buy
cart,
something and
we want to
pay.
see
Yeah.
20% of those people actually check out. And you should know what that is. Maybe it's already 20%. We want to grow at 20%. Okay, so we need someone from the front end web team, probably the marketing team, maybe the product merchandising team. There's probably a platform team involved. Maybe there's an app experience. You need that team. You need to get, all your players. You need to sit them down and say, okay, how do we make this go 20%? Or obviously more is good, but you need to have some sort of a
Yeah.
benchmark to try to hit. And I always hear like, we're going to grow at 100%. It's like, yeah, you want
Yes.
aspirational
You gotta keep
goals,
it keep it
but
within reason. Yeah, keep it within reason too. Yeah.
yeah, okay. So the team sits around forever and then you just bloat too. Like that's not necessarily a good way to do it, especially for like a feature kind of like this. But if you're spinning up like a cart experience, that probably needs to be pulled from people who already exist in your company and then will become a team at some point, right?
Right.
The checkout team, or there's all sorts of ways to organize for that. But yeah, so then you fund that at the executive level, and the other executives understand, the engineering executive, the marketing executive, the product executive, the customer support executive, the finance people all understand that we're going to put, a head count towards this. It's going to
Okay.
cost that money. And then I don't know if how people want to like infrastructure and all this other stuff, but you could say, we want to run an experiment with A/B testing and we need this software and it's going to, there's always some tangible costs. Figure out how you want to. Most companies have those constraints. Not big tech companies don't care, but like a lot of companies would. So like you need to have maybe some budget. And then if you overhit the budget, but you're making progress, then that's the conversation of like, maybe we need to put more money into this. And that should be then an executive conversation at the quarterly funding meetings or planning meetings or however you're doing budgeting as a company to say, hey, yeah, we've got, 18% conversion. We've hit the limit on our A/B testing software. We need to re-up that. We think that all this other stuff might also be helpful and we need X amount of dollars to do it. We can run a trial for 60 days. We're not committing to 10 years of software, that kind of stuff. Like
Yeah.
It's so weird to try to describe this stuff because I feel like it's so easy to do, but that's why I focus on like what not to do, because it's like, if you just
Yeah.
get people and you actually empower them and you actually trust them to do work and then you verify what they're doing, it's really simple and it works really well. You're still doing hard and it's not easy.
Right.
But this is not a hard process to do. But then everybody wants to like get their fingers in, and then someone gets jealous, and then they, why does your team get the budget? It's like, it's not your team, it's the company.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We as a company are choosing to deploy our capital in this way because we think it's going to grow our business 20%, which translates to $50 million in more revenue. Your team.
Yeah. I think that's why it comes down to a lot of times, at least in the startup space. I mean, you could probably argue this in general. It comes down to the talent and the people. Like if you put smart enough people who have the right idea in mind in a room together, they're probably going to get something good done, right? So it's that's why it's so important to have the type of people who understand or share a lot of the mentality. I'm going to hesitate to use the word, but like the culture.
Yeah.
That we keep talking about.
I don't disagree with you, but like the lean process is a great example, right? So I've been in many companies that have great people, but are they the best of the best? Probably not. Let's be honest.
Sure.
Everyone thinks they are, but you're not. Like, and that's
There's always
fine.
something better than you.
Yeah, that's okay.
Right.
But the lean process is a way to get people to collaborate, to empower people who are doing the work to be able to document changes and improve without being told what to do. And I'd say it works 100% of the time if you do it right. 100% of it. When I worked in healthcare, we would always come in and institute these. That was a big deal. And when I was doing it, everybody was doing lean. And it always worked super well the first time. And then what would happen would be the executives would like, it's too slow, or we need to focus on this. Like, that's not lean. Lean is the people doing the work, improving the process, measuring it, and finding outcome. It's not being told what to do. And that's, I think, a great segue to like top down, bottom up.
Top down versus bottom up. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Like you need to say like, we're going to run one lean experiment a month or a quarter or whatever. That's your top down. And then the people need to figure out what that is. And maybe your first lean experiment is, let's come up with all the problems that we know we have so that next month we can pick one to focus on.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
ask the right question is a lot of the times, because I understand everybody wants action, and I understand nothing happens fast enough. And like anyone who knows me knows that like nothing can happen fast enough for me. I'm an insanely impatient person. I get it. But part of your job as an executive is to shut the fuck up and let people do the work.
So people do the thing. Yeah. Do what they need to do.
Right. And that doesn't mean
Right.
they go away in a black box and you don't ever hear about anything. But if you actually want to innovate, which means you're actually going to make money in different ways than other people, you're going to differentiate your company, then, and that doesn't mean inventing a bunch of new, that just means like one of the things when I was at a hospital back in the day, the Band-Aids were kept in the medicine closet for some reason. And they were on a unit where there was a lot of people who were, it was an ambulatory unit. So people were in and out all the time. And a lot of kids would come in and they just need a Band-Aid because it's a kid and they're bleeding, right? They don't need a trauma unit. And so they were like, well, if we just move the Band-Aids from the supply closet to the nurses station where people check in, people could just grab a Band-Aid.
Oh,
And then we
I was
don't,
gonna say, where are the band supposed to go?
right? I know it sounds insane, right? But what would
Yeah.
happen is that the person at the front desk couldn't prescribe medical treatment because there's some, booking agent
Yeah.
basically. And they'd have to go find a nurse, and the nurse would be busy. And then the nurse would have, because they had the keys to the medicine closet, and then they had to go and do it. And then they had to write a bunch of documentation. The documentation piece was a whole nother thing that probably needed to happen. But like the act of just literally pulling somebody away from a patient or pulling someone away from their job to get a Band-Aid, but it was a common enough occurrence because of the nature of the population that I was like, what are you talking about? Like, this is insane. And then they
Yeah.
did the experiment lean, all this kind of stuff. And they found that, yeah, it saves them, I think it was like 20 minutes a shift or something, which it doesn't sound like a lot until you multiply that by, 5 people on the unit times,
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
and sure, but it's also a quality of life for the employee. They don't have to get disrupted and get a Band-Aid. And
Yeah.
then the patient, who you're supposed to be there for the whole time anyway, is super happy because they don't wait 20 minutes or they don't get forgotten about, right? They're just like, oh, and then they get a, cute little dinosaur Band-Aid for their kid, and then everyone's happy. It's just this like, it's a very simple example. But if you just go in as an executive and say, we need to be 10% more efficient, like, yeah, okay, maybe that's kind of a lazy vision. It's a vision, but it's a lazy vision. But that's where you have to find that balance. And what I find oftentimes is that the executives are out of the loop and they get cut out, and then they like kind of freak out. And so then they try to come in the room and they don't realize that when the VP or, a senior director or someone who's been at the company forever comes in the room, no one's going to tell you their opinion.
Yeah.
But I think the ethos of everyone in the company really does need to be like, we're growing the business.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how are we contributing to revenue? Because you're a company.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people lose that. That's like, they're losing the script. It's like, yeah, you're in a hospital and you're trying to treat people. Yeah, but how do you treat people the cheapest you can without, compromising their care quality? How do you build the best software you can without spending a ton of money in AWS credits that,
or creating these these
I
features
left
that
the
lock people into your
cluster.
product.
Yeah, I left the cluster run all weekend, and now it's like $10,000, right? Like, so it is a little bit of a mentality thing, but, and I think that, I don't know, maybe that segues a little bit into like, growing the business versus the customer feature lock-in, which is probably the number one thing I see in early companies.
Yeah.
Or early products. Like, you can be in a very old company that has a new product line or something they're trying to spin up, and you get that first customer and you're just going to build everything that first customer wants because you got to close that sale, or you got to increase the revenue, or you got to get more users in. And then what you end up doing is buying or building
custom solution for that one person.
Exactly. And then it doesn't
Yeah.
scale out. You accumulate a ton of tech debt, and that's the silent killer in a software company. That's a silent killer in any company.
I've seen that so many times. Yeah.
I know, right? Because it's like, oh, we'll just do this thing, it'll be easy. And then you do it, and maybe it's easy, but then you go down the road 2 years and you're like, oh, that easy thing
What
we
that?
did,
What?
it totally sinks
Yeah.
us. You laugh
Yeah.
because
Or
this happens all the
I
time,
could
right?
no. I've seen it. I've been a part of it.
Yep.
I'm sure I made the mistake myself. I always blame the past me.
Well, and I know, right? And like as a product person, you sometimes have to make those. You have to get the feature to market. You have to meet the deadline, the whatever. But the company then also needs to understand that we got it over the line. Now we're going to have to go and either undo some stuff or rebuild some stuff in a better way. And like to your point earlier, a lot of engineers love to just build.
Yes.
Right. So you have to be able to hedge against that. But your engineering leadership needs to understand the difference between we're having engineer fun time and we're building the ideal world versus we know we built this thing really poorly or really quickly or hacked it together. Now we need to go make sure it's a little bit more robust.
Yeah.
And there, it's a balance thing, right? But what I see so
I'm
much
saying
is like,
it's because they balance.
no,
Yeah.
and in the interviews, I've gotten these questions like, "How do you make those trade-offs?" Well, and it's like, well, it comes down to business priority and does the reward outweigh the risk? That's a hard thing to determine. It depends on a lot of parameters, but
Right.
ultimately, that should be how it comes down to. But then I always say, and then I expect to like clean that up at some point, and maybe it's not the next day or the next quarter, but like you have to know how bad of a decision that is. And then you also, the company has to, but the problem again, going back to like the executive top down is it's like always grow, 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 build, 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 build. And then a lot of companies sink because you get that big customer that you actually want to build that custom feature for, and then you can't because you've built a house of cards on sand, right?
Yeah. 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 It is definitely a difficult problem, but it goes. These are psychological biases, right? Like confirmation
Yeah.
bias. When you are trying to build something, you get your first customer, you're like, oh, we got some validation. We found something. Let's just keep going, kind of thing. And you sort of lose sight
And
of the broader
that's one of the
picture.
hardest thing as a product manager is you need to be out with the customers. Hopefully you have more than one and you're not just like truly in that like first customer. And that's a little different when if you're trying to build like an MVP and you're trying to get that first customer. Yeah, you probably have to do
Yeah.
a lot of stuff if you have a letter of intent. I see a lot of companies that they just, oh, well, the sales guy said that they're going to buy it if we do this. Okay, great. Have them sign
Yeah.
a letter of intent. And if we deliver the feature, they can buy it. Oh, well, we can't do that. Well, then I'm not building it.
It's a good
You know,
good mechanism to bring in what
right.
is.
And
I
like
don't think they're binding, but yeah.
they can be
Um,
depending on how you write them. But,
okay.
and like a lot of times, there's other strategies, but effectively you need an agreement other than a trust me,
Right.
bro.
Right. Yeah. The ideal is that they're giving you money.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, but it's so other than that, like it's really hard as a product manager to be able to be in touch with enough customers to build the things that you know that they need for either their specific world or the problems you're identifying and you're seeing start to overlap in addition to things the company knows that it needs to build or the things the company wants to try because hopefully you're building that isn't parity to the rest of the world because now you're building like a differentiated company which is actually going to be valuable versus replicating what other people.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I'm reminded of I think we brought this up on one of the maybe the more recent podcasts, but the idea of intentionality,
Yeah.
right? Like common thread line and all the stuff we talked about, whether you're a high level executive, if your intention is just to grow, 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 then it's not the right intention. You're probably setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah.
If you're talking about the product manager who is trying to close the first sale and they're building something specifically for one customer, if that's your intention, that maybe that's not the best choice. But if you find, or even if you have an idea that whatever you're building can be expanded out to somebody else, then you're probably you're setting yourself up better than if you were just to build something specifically for one person.
100. Otherwise, you're just like basically a contracting company at that point, right? Yeah. No. Do you have any other final thoughts on the big three? Maybe we'll expand more on these in the future.
Yeah, no, these are good topics. I think we'll consistently come back to.
All right, man. See you next
All
time.
right, as always, a pleasure.
You can find us at 3reate.com. It's like the word create, but with a 3 instead of the C. As always, we encourage you to listen, watch, do. We'll see you next time. You can support this podcast at patreon.com/3reate or at ko-fi.com/3reate. Thanks for listening.